Ethan, how's it going? Alrighty. So, thanks for sending this stuff. I just went through it a little bit and things look pretty good. I didn't go through everything yet, and I figured instead of spending another 20 minutes going through everything, I would just roll tape and we could talk about things as I come across them. But cool. So let's jump over to the Samba stuff first. What did I want to mention to you? What did I want to mention to you? I don't know. It'll come to me. I thought of something this week that was worthy of mentioning, and I forget what that was. I bet I'll remember before I'm done recording this. So, Samba stuff. This is great. I did actually listen to all of this. So, nice job editing the MIDI. I think we can both agree that it sounds groovy now, right? It's tight. Oh, that's what I want to mention to you. Okay, so you play these on a MIDI keyboard, right? And that's what I do as well. And just know that since you and I are not, well, certainly me, are not great keyboard players, piano players, like when I play stuff in on the MIDI keyboard, it's not really gonna groove all that well because I'm not a keyboard player. So just know that this whole editing thing that you went through is because, like me, you are not a good keyboard player. You're a drummer. So, we just don't spend enough time with our fingers on the keyboards to develop a certain amount of feel and control and precision and be able to really groove well on a keyboard. So, usually I'll do I'll pick a section that needs a bass line, for example, and I'll just loop that section and I'll record the bass line over it multiple times. And when you do that in Reaper, it does this automatic thing, which is actually great, where it sets up individual takes. And every time it goes back to the beginning, it's just a new take. And then you can go through and delete the takes or just save the one that you wanted. Then, I'm likely to get one that's pretty close to grooving, and then I'll go in and I'll do the editing process that you did this past week. So anyways, I just thought I'd mention that. So since you and I are not keyboard players, we got to go in and edit these things because they just don't really groove. But for example, if you were to get something that was recorded in MIDI from an actual keyboard player, chances are, if they're good, chances are you don't even have to really touch it. Maybe a note here or a note there might need a little tweak, but it's basically good to go. So, all right. Cool. Let's just check out each one of these. So right now the bass is super hot in the mix compared to the drums. So it's hard to make any kind of decisions about this when the mix isn't even close to what we would want. So I'm just going to bring that guy down a little bit here. Okay. Cool. I mean, it's a little weird at this point. I don't know if the length is that really what we want. I know we talked about this a bit last week. How long do we actually want them to sustain? I don't know. Maybe for my ears, maybe they're ringing out a little too much. Maybe. Let me turn that click off. We don't need that. I mean, it's a little hard to make decisions on it because we don't have anything else in here right now. But um, my initial reaction is that they're just ringing out. It's a little too monotonous, and I think it's maybe not so much the actual length of the MIDI note, but it's maybe the sustain release adjustment in our plugin here. Maybe it's just a little too much. Let's see if we reduce that a little bit, what happens. So that might have been a little too much. Bring it up a little bit more. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe something like that. Whatever, obviously, this is something, the beauty of working digital and with MIDI and stuff is like, later on, if we don't like it, we can just change it. So, cool. All right, let's look at the next one. By the way, I really like this transition right now. Super contrast, right? Totally different vibe, mostly because of the bass change, right? Here we just have sustained, droney kind of stuff. Oh, I mean, what would happen if we lowered this an octave? If it's droney, which it is, that's a C sharp. What would happen if we lowered it an octave? Cool, right? Just grab it, drag it down. That would make it even more droney sounding. It might sound kind of nice. Ooh, I like that. Do you like that? I'm kind of digging that. Let's see here. I think I can grab them all at once if I know what I'm doing, which apparently I don't. We'll just do them by themselves. And you gotta be careful when you drag these down because you can change its length and stuff, and its place in time. See? Back that up. Sometimes what I do is I grab the cursor and I put it where the note head is, and I drag down to the note, and then if I got off as far as time goes, I can just make sure it's right back to that cursor. And because we have snap on, it just snapped right to it. So that's a little trick. Check this out. Kind of like that right there. Yeah, that's working really well. Because we lowered it an octave, now the sustain of it, we kind of actually want that because it became much more droney. So, a lot of things in production and composition, a lot of it is what sounds and what frequencies you choose. and hopefully it's kind of a broad statement, but that'll make more sense the more we go into this. But we'll definitely notice when we start mixing this stuff that it's so much easier to mix a composition that has sounds and frequencies that are already working well with each other. I'll repeat that. It's so much easier to mix a composition when you're dealing with sounds and frequencies that already work well with each other. And this is something that I have just a little bit of experience with, and it's something I'm learning more about. But of all the stuff I've written digitally, it's just gotten better over time because of what I just said. I have a better understanding of sounds that work well with each other and frequencies that work well with each other. So up here, this would be an example where we have this droney, sustainy bass thing, and it doesn't really stop, right? There's no space there. So whatever frequency this is, it's eating up that space the entire time. So once we start adding other things to this, which we'll talk about today, you'll realize that there's only a certain amount of real estate available in terms of frequency. And if you have a lot of instruments or sounds hanging out in the same frequency range, they just sort of bury each other and cover each other up, and you end up with a muddy, flat, boring, lifeless mix that you could go in and EQ and process till the cows come home, and you still can't really fix it because the frequencies are stepping on each other, and maybe the sounds are also stepping on each other. So one thing we did by lowering this a whole octave is that we freed up that sort of upper bass register for other things. And since we made this so low, the only thing that's really going to conflict with it a little bit would be the kick drum. And, unfortunately, we don't have a separate kick drum mic here, so that could make it a little bit tricky. But your kick is also fairly dry and punchy sounding, so that I don't think it's going to be a major issue to get that to pop out in the mix and to get it where we can hear the bass nicely and we can hear the kick nicely. And probably frequency wise, the bass here is going to be lower in frequency. It's going to be below the frequency of your kick drum. This is a pretty low note here. So not only are we changing frequencies as far as where things are hanging out, but we also have different sounds here, right? Your kick drum, you don't have a big, open, boomy, super low-tuned kick drum, for example. Which if you did, that could be a problem in choosing this frequency and this sound and this part of a bass line that we have here. So hopefully that makes a little sense. I don't know how well I explained that, but let's move on. So, okay, the next section. Let's throw an EQ on these just so we can see what's going on EQ wise. So this bass line over here that we just heard, very cool by the way, I like this. and it's grooving nicely with the drums now, which is great. This was kind of a slop fest last week, but you fixed it, so that's great. This is almost more of a tenor bass kind of part. So it's sort of higher in the register of where a bass would typically hang out, which is okay. It sounds nice, but we need to keep that in mind when putting in other instruments. And we should understand that, like, this section here with this low rumbly bass has a certain amount of power to it. It sounds big because it's got that low fat bass thing. And then when you come over here and you go to this spacious tenor bass thing, it sounds lighter and it sounds almost a little bit empty and less powerful in a way. So that's something to understand about bass. That's really, that's kind of the role of the bass in a lot of ways, is it controls the power in music. I mean, certainly you could argue like a big stack of distorted guitars is powerful, but why are they powerful? Well, they have a lot of bass frequency in them. Little side note, I've been listening to some music lately, and I've started to notice more about mix with things. And I listened to a little bit of Government Mule yesterday, which I'm pretty sure we've looked at some Government Mule before. Matt Abbs on drums, killer drummer. And I noticed that their mix on their finished albums is very, very thick and borderline a little bit muddy, actually. It doesn't have the clarity and the real punch that you would hear in, say, like a pop mix, for example, or maybe a reggae mix or an R&B type mix. Why is that? Well, Government Mule is guitar, bass, drums, and organ, typically. And it's rock music, fairly aggressive. And I realized, oh, okay, well, it sounds borderline muddy and maybe a little bit thicker. And I like thick for that kind of thing, but this is like borderline muddy. And it's like, okay, it's because they're all fighting for the same space, because they all want that space. Certainly Warren Haynes, like, he doesn't really want to roll off the lows too much on his amazing distorted old school guitar sound. Like, and you can't blame him. Like, when you're playing live, and those guys are very much a live band, like, it gives you so much power on stage, and it makes the music so fun. His sound is just thick and low and fat and super powerful. And then at the same time, the bass player, like, it's powerful rock music, and he wants a certain amount of lows in his bass sound. He wants it to shake the stage, so he doesn't really want to give up some lows. The drummer is probably the least controlling of his sound. I actually, Matt is such an incredible drummer, and I love his taste and the decisions that he makes. Not to mention his groove and his feel and all of that. But I'll have to say that his drum sound is very generic sounding. It bores the heck out of me, his drum sound. It's not identifiable whatsoever. It just sounds like a straight up, like, stock rock drum sound. Nothing interesting there whatsoever. It sounds right and it sounds clean, but it's just boring as fuck. So, you know, it being rock music, you'd want a little bit fatter, deeper snare sound. So there's some lows in there that you wouldn't really want to give up. And the kick drum, you're definitely going for dry punch, but not like super dead, single-headed 70s drum sound. Like you want a little bit of body in there for sure. So, so the drums, they got some lows that they don't really want to give up on either. And then as far as the Hammond organ, I don't know, maybe the lows aren't as important there, but I'm sure in a live situation, that dude wants his full frequency range as well. So I would guess that the reason their mix is maybe a little too thick is because they're just all really stubborn about their frequency range. And none of them want to give up on those lows. Where, in reality, they could get a little bit cleaner of a mix if every single one of them, just rolled off some shit that's eating up too much space. All right, cool. That was a pretty big tangent. But you could do that, man. Throw on, I was listening, they have like a new record. I think it was like they released it in the last couple years or something like that. Throw on that record, just listen to part of the first song or whatever, and listen through speakers or headphones or something, and just notice the thickness and the fatness and borderline muddiness, and then throw on like a pop track. Could be anything. And notice how clean and punchy and tight that sound is compared to the Government Mule sound. All right. I'm moving on. So we got an EQ here. So let's also throw an EQ over here. Bring that up. So this guy here is the purple section, and this guy here is the green section. So we're bringing this up to just see, like, where is it peaking in terms of frequency, so we can compare. So it's kind of like almost more like in the low mids, which makes sense because it's kind of like a tenor bass part. There's really not a ton of information below like 200, and it's sort of peaking in the 200-ish range compared to this. Everything below 100 here is just super fat, right? And then it tapers there. So EQ could be helpful just to get that visual. When we start mixing, you'll spend a lot of time looking at those things. All right. Let's listen to this a little bit more. I don't think I had a whole lot else to say other than that. Notice that we're in the tenor bass range, and maybe we want to keep it there, maybe we don't. But it's worth noting. And I'm just looking. I'm just checking your pitch here. Okay. C sharp, G sharp. So you're working in like C sharp, basically. Am I right? C sharp major. That's your scale? Okay. So that's cool. You could consider changing, modulating, if you wanted to. Is there a way to do that easily? I'm sure there's another way to do this, but probably what I would do is just highlight me see here. It's a little tricky to grab all that. This is the old school manual way of doing it. Highlight everything. Make sure we got everything. Okay, so it's all highlighted. Now, I'm going to throw that cursor right at the beginning of the note head. And then, let's say we wanted to go up a step. Cool, right? And so that grabbed that entire section and brought you up a half step. So now we might even have more contrast going from section 1 to section 2. It's all about contrast, dude. Ooh, yeah, I dig that. Okay, let's take it a little bit further back. Cool. That's all working. I don't know. Do you like the key change? I like it. It doesn't have to be a half step up. I mean, it could be whatever you want. But a half step is usually kind of... There's a lot of contrast there. If you went up like a fourth or a fifth, it might just sound like you're putting it into like a blues form or something, which could be kind of boring. What else? What else? Just thinking here. Bear with me. I question the placement of the bass in relation to the drum track. In terms of, do we want the bass, the entire bass track, to be a little bit behind the drums, or do we want it to be a little bit ahead of the drums? Not sure, but you could do that. Which is what I do. That was a very drastic move though. So basically you can grab, I'm kind of used to doing this when it's in waveforms, but I think it works. I think we can do it just in MIDI like that. Does that change the end at all if we do that? No. Okay. So if you were to grab this whole thing and slide it one way or the other, you would change its relationship to the drum track in terms of time, in terms of being ahead or behind. Let's listen a little bit more. Some of these close guys sound a little bit rushed to me. But what if we decided to put the bass a little bit behind the drum track? Right now, it's to my ears, it sounds like it's pretty much right down the middle, which it probably is, because that's kind of how you edited it. Right? You basically just sort of manually lined it up with all the drum waveforms, so it kind of puts it right down the middle. But let's say we want it more behind. So to put it more behind, we would have to grab this whole thing and slide it to the right, right? To the right, correct? Which means the bass is happening a little bit later in time compared to the drums. So remember what we just heard, And then I'm going to grab this and slide it. I don't know. That might be way too much, but let's see what that does. Oh, here's a little trick. So I'm backing out of that. And there's other ways to do this in Reaper, but what I would do, like I'm a manual kind of guy, I just put the cursor at the beginning of the note where we were, and then I just hit M to put a marker there. So no matter where we slide this, if we forget where we started from, we always can come back to that. Okay? So slide to the right. Now listen. I think that's working a lot better. I know it's very subtle. We could almost go a little bit more and see what happens. Yeah, I like that. What if I get like super drastic, just for shits and giggles? You almost get more drastic. Are we hearing change? Let's go crazy. Okay, now that's crazy change, right? That's like way too much. What if we make it drastic, but not quite that drastic? Okay, so that's super drastic. Like we want to deal with something a little more subtle, like maybe the first couple moves we had. But I'm just trying to push it. Like, how far behind can we make it where it's like super far behind, but still works? Closer, right? It's still too much, though. That's probably about the limit, and I don't really like that. But if you wanted it to be way behind, somewhere in there is probably about the limit. So we started way the hell back here. So that's a pretty drastic change. What if we go halfway between that and where we started? That could potentially be pretty nice. Yeah, so I hope you're maybe hearing this. Play around with it. This is how we learn. This is how we train our ears. I know we spent a little bit of time before working on playing ahead, down the middle, and behind and stuff like that. And you were doing well with it. So I know you have the ears to hear it. Just, okay, so know that when I do digital composition, I start by playing in the MIDI stuff, and then I go in and I edit the MIDI to the drums, just like you did. And then this is actually kind of my next question, or my next step. Before I move on to recording more things, or mixing, or putting effects on stuff, all the fun stuff, I really question the placement of things in relationship to each other, and I spend as much time as needed at this pretty crucial phase. So, I mean, it didn't sound bad having it the way it was, kind of right down the middle, but if you really listen, to my ears, it was kind of like, it sounds a little panicky, it's not totally grooving. Um, and because I've done this a bunch, I knew that the placement of the bass was kind of the problem for me. And I should also mention that I tend to like the bass to be behind the drums in most situations, which is kind of weird because as a live drummer, I usually like playing behind everyone else a little bit. I just sort of do it naturally a lot of times. Um, if I'm in the middle or playing ahead, it's because I'm trying to a lot of times. Uh, and I almost feel like live is a little bit different. But in this situation, I tend to prefer the bass to be a little bit behind the drums. So where we have it now was pretty good. To my ears, it was still maybe a little bit too far behind. So I'm just going to drag it back a little bit more and then we'll move on. Yeah, so something like that I think is an improvement. Okay, let's look at the next section. Are we back in C sharp? No? Yes? No? Okay, so I think you changed keys here. Am I right? My ears should just tell me this without me having to look at it, but I got drummer ears. I don't know. I think the transition sounded good. Yeah, it's very different. I like that. Okay, so let's listen to that section. Why are we not getting things? Oh boy, I'm confused. Why are we not hearing this? Is something wrong here? So I'm not sure why we're hearing that. It almost sounds like there's a bug or something. So I'm going to quit Reaper. I saved that. And then reopen. Could be a bug. Why is that so weird? Huh. Are you, Ethan, are you hearing this on your end? It's weird, right? It's almost like there's a bug or something. Did I hit something by accident? Did you send it to me like this? Weird. See, it's not even playing the notes that are there. Some of them are short. Some of them it's not even playing. What's the plugin look like? Okay. Okay. Here's what I think happened. You went in and moved all of these like you were supposed to, but now there's overlap in the note length, which is causing some notes to not sound and causing some notes to sound shorter than they should. That's a weird little thing about MIDI. There might be a setting for this somewhere, but I'm not sure what it is. So let's double check this. But I think you'll have to go in and manually probably shorten the note length on a lot of these to make sense of your bass line again. So hopefully you were wondering what the hell happened to your bass line once you moved things around. So this note here is not being played. So if we were to shorten this guy, maybe that one will get played, I hope. Yes, okay, so that's the problem. So you got to go in here and shorten all these a little bit. So we need that gap. Some of it could be the setting on the plugin, actually. If you went in and tweaked your sustain and release settings, it might solve this. But I think I like what I'm hearing there, and I think this is probably the better way to do it. Do it the right way instead of relying on plugin settings. If you want to change it later, it's easier. Alright, this guy's super short because this guy's too long, right? Yep. Same with this one. Okay, so, phew! Boy, oh boy. Got nervous there for a second. I thought there was a bug, or I thought that I really had no idea what I was talking about. So, which apparently I did, because it took me a minute to figure it out. So that's the deal. I think the placement is probably cool, but you got to go in and change the note length so that all makes sense again. So do that. Let's look at the next section. Okay, so I did listen to this earlier, and I'm wondering why it's not lining up with the click track. Oops, sorry. Hear that? The rest of these were good with the click, I think. But when we get to this section, the click is a different tempo from the drums and the bass. So I'm not sure what happened there. It would be nice if you could figure that out. There's an extra empty track here. It looks like you were doing something with the click or whatever to try to fix that. I think, like I said, the previous sections were lined up with the click. But this last section is still not with the click. And it would be nice to have the click. So you may need to put on a new click source. If you need 2 click tracks over here, that's fine. However you can do it. But it would be nice to have that because we might need it. Anyways, let's listen to it without the click. Okay, cool. I like this. I think it's working, but this is definitely another situation where we'd want to play around with the placement of the bass line in relationship to the drums. So either ahead, down the middle, or behind. So right now it sounds to me like it's kind of in the middle, almost a little bit ahead at times. So my go-to would be to come in here and move it behind a little bit like we did with the other one. So again, I would probably throw a marker so we know where we started. And then drag it over to the right a little bit to put it more behind. Cool, that's too far behind. Maybe here. So, you know, this gets a little weird because it works for like the first couple bars, and then the next couple bars it's a little too draggy. So you know, if you're crazy passionate, you could move your MIDI notes so that they're closer to the drums. It seems like some of it was really close to the drums and some of it wasn't all that close, which is, you know, ideally we're getting it close to begin with so that when we do this slide move, we can just do the slide move and the whole thing works. But, you know, if you didn't want to do that, or for now, I would probably just kind of find a middle ground maybe that works for everything. Like there-ish is sort of a compromise, maybe even a little bit less behind. Yeah, so that's working pretty well. Okay, so boy oh boy, here we are, 47 minutes already. Moral of the story. Make the tweaks that I made if you feel like you liked them. Or maybe just make them anyways. I realize I'm sort of very much guiding your composition at this point and making a lot of the decisions. And I don't necessarily like doing that, but I think it's just in order to point out the things that you need to learn and the things that I need to point out, it sort of makes sense for me to just, you know, determine the direction of this to some degree. So, you know, this isn't something we're crazy precious about. It's more of an exercise for you to learn about Reaper and learn about production and all this stuff. So, I guess, you know, make the moves, drop that an octave, shift this in time a little bit, change the note lengths on this, and this also may need to be shifted in time a little bit, probably does, and shift this guy in time, and then you're caught up with that stuff, and then, okay, so here's the thing, write a rhythmic, not rhythmic, a rhythm part for this stuff. So a chordal thing, you know, something that would be like a keyboard player would play to accompany a song. Basically chords, right? So we have the bass lines in here, we have the drums. Now we want some chords, a chordal rhythm part. So let's stick with the same plugin. Maybe we'll do this whole composition with just one plugin. So over in presets, you'd want to look at potentially pads. You'd want to look at keys. What else? That's probably it. Keys and pads. Leads, maybe, but some leads won't give you the option for polyphony, which means playing more than one note at the same time. So keys will definitely do that. Pads most of the time should do that. So pads and keys will be sounds you can find. I like this one. Almost piano. Pretty cool. So pick pick a sound you like. Let's go again for now. Let's go again with just one sound. We can always change sounds later if we want to. But go for, find one sound that you really like and write a chordal rhythm part for each of these sections. And like you did with the bass, put them each on their own track so we have control over that. And you can do whatever you want. A couple things worth noting. In terms of density or sustain versus staccato, like this first one, you already have a very sustainy bass drone thing going on. So, chances are pretty good that maybe you don't want a sustainy chordal thing going on. Maybe you want something more rhythmic here, or something with more space. Whereas here, there's nothing sustainy, so maybe you'd want something sustainy. So that's the idea. This guy, it's sort of in the middle, right? There's always an option to play chordal things with parts of your bass line rhythmically at the same time. That kind of thing's an option. It becomes more like a riff if you do that. So anyway, it's up to you. And the chords, the keys that you're working in. So obviously you got to deal with that. You got to pick chords that work with the bass line that you already wrote in terms of pitch. And they don't need to be crazy. Like it could just be 2 notes, could just be 3 notes. Play around with your voicing. So it doesn't always have to be 1, 3, 5, 7. It could be, any order. You could put the 7th scale degree on the bottom. You could put the 5th scale degree on the bottom. Like, whatever. It's up to you. Okay. I think we're good on this, right? We're good. So you're doing all that stuff, and you're writing a chordal rhythmic part. Beauty. Thank you. Let's move over to loops. Okay. Okay, so I'm not sure what this weird crossfade is here. Let's listen to just the hi-hat parts. What if we got rid of that? Sounds about the same. Usually you get an automatic crossfade when you overlap two items, which maybe is what was going on there. But whatever. Doesn't matter. So this is sounding pretty good. Let's hear that again. Compared to the original. It's so interesting, right? Contrasting these two. Like, you hear so much room sound in the original part up here, which of course you would. I think I mentioned this before, but it just blows my mind every time I hear it. This is so tight and controlled because of the close miking, and this is so open and kind of boomy. Very different sounds. It's not that one is better than the other. It's just they're very different, and we can use them in different ways. Okay. Cool. I didn't hear much pitch change in your hi-hat. That might be something you want to mess with a little bit. It looks like you messed with volumes. But maybe you want to change pitches, make it even a little more human sounding. It's worth spending the time and effort on this hi-hat part, because this is the thing that just is going to make it sound so robotic. It's still a little bit robotic sounding, right? Getting maybe a little more drastic with the placement in time, changing the pitch a little bit more. I would probably spend a little more time on this hi-hat part if it were me. Okay, let's check out this one. Oops, we're gonna need this to come out here. Where are you? There you are. Make sure that looks good. Uh-oh. What do we have here? Uh-oh, Ethan. Uh-oh. Does it make you nervous? It would make me nervous. The old uh-oh. Not a big deal. Whoops. I'm just making these a little bigger so we can see them. So we have a little bit of stuff hanging out here. Let's hear what this sounds like first. You don't really hear it, but if we were to extend this, it could be trouble. So just grab these, option, click, snap that back. Actually, a better way to do this is probably to just re-split these, since there's not a whole lot of stuff going on here, and put in a fade, get rid of those. Hopefully that's okay. Yeah. Okay, so that's cool. So now we just want to make sure we're in our box. I'm just going to bring the master up over here just because my headphone volume can't go any louder with this screen share program, and I need a little more volume. But know that, like real life, we basically never touch this master volume. The groove is a little strange. Let's compare it to the original. The kick around beat 2 of the second bar, if we're at 120, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's a little too swung on this guy. These guys, right? Those guys. It's very hip-hoppy. Very different from what we had up here. To me, it's just a little bit out of character. It's not that we don't want that sometimes, but to me, it's like a different beat because of the placement of these two. Like, wait, are those our kicks? Hang on. Where's our kicks? Up here. These guys. Sorry. Let me make this a little bigger. Too big. Okay. Okay, so they're a little too swingy. So let's see. We just grab this guy, drag him back, and he snapped over, which may be okay. Let's hear that. That's so much better. What else? I could use maybe a little, even still, a little less swing. So I'm going to turn snap off first. I'm going to grab this guy, give myself a little more room, and then pull that guy back. See about that. Oh, that's pretty good, but I think I went a little bit further than I wanted to. It's still, now they're still a tiny bit too far apart, but instead of bringing this forward more, I think I want to bring the second one back more. Sound a little draggy to me. Yep, pretty nice. This snare here sounds a little bit further behind than I would want it to be. I know. It's crazy. Develop ears to hear these things the more we go on. Yep, that's better. Now this guy is a little bit behind. Bring him back a little bit. So I like the spacing of these two, but I feel like they're a little bit too late in time together. So if I bring that back more, grab that, highlight both of them, I should be able to drag both of them a little bit earlier in time, which will get us what we want, maybe. Yeah, I think I could almost go a little bit more. That was better, though. Yeah, getting closer. This snare sounds a little late to me now. Bring him back. Yeah, okay. So I should mention that I'm not necessarily trying to copy what I heard up here totally. I'm just trying to make the thing groove better based on placement. One thing of interest would be, what's the placement of the snare drum to the bell of the ride cymbal? So here's are these quarter notes here? Oh, that's hi-hat. Nice adjustments there, by the way. That sounds much better. So visually we can just look. So you can see like the snare is much later than the bell on that guy. And we have no bell there. What about this snare? This snare is actually a little bit earlier. Okay. What do our ears tell us? My ears are telling me that the ride is a little bit of ahead of everything in a way. And I'm hearing a little bit of a clash with this bell and kick. Very slight. Looks better than I thought it would. What if we grab all the snares and make them a little bit more ahead of the beat? So I highlighted all those, and I just want to drag them over a little bit. Yeah, that's better. Okay. So it's like the what we did with the train beats last week, where we made a couple loops and we were just really listening to these subtle little differences in terms of placement of time. That's what we're doing with this, and just trying to make decisions that make it sound groovy and not awkward, which it was a little awkward sounding a few minutes ago. Let's compare the two now, the original to this one. Yeah, it's weird. I know I haven't been super stoked about this loop. It's clean at the end, but there's still a little extra space here. What happens when we play them at the same time? That could be interesting. Yeah, so I mean, we hear things flamming, right? But this could be a really interesting effect, and I think that's kind of the direction we're heading here. Is eventually combining the original with the sampled ones in a way that sounds cool. So to me, that sounded cool. It was a little extreme. So what we'd go in and get a little more surgical, but I think we'll save that for another lesson because that could take a really long time to. Well, I don't know about a really long time, but that could take a while to talk about. So for now, I would probably make the changes that I just made. Use your ears, and obviously, like you're sharing these Reaper project files with me, and I'm making all these changes, and then I'm not saving them and sending you back the file on purpose, um, because I want you to do the work for yourself because that's how you're gonna learn. You watch me do it, you listen to me talk about it for way too long, and then you go in and you use your own ears and your own skill sets within Reaper to make similar changes, and they don't have to be identical. But that's how you're going to learn. So, okay, let's look at this last one up here. Cool, and you made that change there with the open hi-hat. That looks great. We probably don't need as much of a fade there actually because we actually are connecting to the one on the back end. We want that connection. I'm obviously sorry I left a little bit of a fade there, so we do have a zero crossing, so we don't get a click or a pop. But then it would be the same here at the end, and hopefully that works. Yeah, that's cool. Cool. That's nice. The mix is a little bit weird. Like the toms are kind of low, the hat's really loud, but whatever. We can deal with that later. Let's compare it to this one. And these two, in terms of placement, they're pretty similar. I think they're both working pretty well. So what if we played them at the same time? Right? So those ones are much closer groove wise. There's just a little bit of flamming in there, much less compared to this guy. We didn't do that with this one, so let's check that out real quick and then we'll wrap this up. Okay, this and this, and we got to change our time selection. I need snap on. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool too. Not quite as flammy. We may end up tweaking this pink guy a little bit more, so it's a little less flammy. But I'm thinking, okay, so here's what I'm thinking. Do the tweaks with the samples, kind of like what I did, to make that groove a little better. And then I think I would rather try to tweak your original groove here to match the sample groove a little bit more, because this guy is just, it's kind of weird. It's a little weird. I don't know. I'm not super sold on it. So anyways, for this week, for this, make the changes that we did on the pink ones, and maybe get a little more surgical with these hi-hat parts on the yellow one. The purple or blue one up here, I think, is basically good to go. Maybe make those little fade tweaks that I did to make that a little bit smoother. And then, okay. I think it's time to add to this. So once you make those changes, let's go baseline again. So baseline. Let's use a different plugin. Let's see what we got in here. Why don't we use Helm? Helm is pretty awesome. So you have Helm, I believe. So here's Helm. Okay, so again, a synth plugin, same approach that we did with the Cinna plugin. Just come in here and find one bass sound that you really dig. So these are the presets. I have a bunch of saved presets up here that I've used in other things. But you'd want to look at the VST built-in programs, the stuff down here. So this looks like weird stuff. And then all these that say bass after them are options. A lot of this stuff is bass. Actually, yeah, we should be in bass mode. It's like all bass from up there way down to stinky bass, bass form of bass, contra bass. Basically anything that says bass on it is going to be good for bass. You could also check out lead stuff if you want to, which is down a little bit further. Leads, some of these things, but you'll probably find something really cool within all those many bass presets up there. Okay, so what else? We approached this in terms of density. So I would say that if it's a high density drum part, you're going to want a low density bass line. If it's a low density drum part, you can have a higher density bass line, though you don't have to. So that's sort of the lesson here is, and that's just sort of a rule of thumb. It doesn't have to be that way. You could have dense and dense, but let's maybe approach it this way. This is a little more logical, like a producer would think in these terms. So if the drums are already crazy busy, like they are here, make your bass line simple. If the drums are spacious, there's an opportunity for the bass to play more. Put the bass on separate tracks so we have control of them. And let's see. If you want to create longer bass lines, which you may want to, because this is pretty short, I would drag all these out. You might have to, let's see, probably have to copy and paste because these aren't turned into loops yet. So here's what you do. You select everything, Just shift click. So everything, make sure you got everything. And then hit Command C for copy, and then come up to the end of it here. Make sure everything's at the end. Make sure you're on Snap. And put your cursor sort of at the top, and then Command V. And you can see that it copied that. And then you can just do that a whole bunch more times until you end up with a whole bunch of them that hopefully just loop together without any issues. Right? Okay, so that's probably what I would do. And then maybe insert your bass tracks at the bottom of each of these sections, but you don't want it to be part of your sample bus. So like if this was going to be the next bass track, I'd go up to low density first, and I'd put it there. And then I'd call that bass, and then this is where I'd record my bass. All right, cool. So bass lines. Hey, here's another thought. What if we make this a vocal track? So the samba thing's gonna be instrumental. What if we go into this with the idea of you putting some vocals on it? Because I think you should explore your vocals. I think they were good, and I think with all more practice and more time, you could be solid, and that would be a huge value to everybody if you're able to sing well, or rap, or write lyrics, or whatever. So, might as well get practicing now. So, when you write your bass lines, think about what key you're in, because you probably are aware of certain keys that are good for singing in for you. You don't want it too low or too high. Obviously, we can change that later if we have to, but I would think about that first. So pick a key or keys that you can sing in comfortably. And since you know that you're going to be singing on this, maybe that will also affect what kind of bass lines you want to put on it to some degree. Okay? Cool. All right. I have got to turn off this video. I've been rambling forever. Hope you're doing well, dude. I don't know. Things are still up in the air, I guess, with the virus and everything, but, hopefully I'll see you at some point before you go off to Chicago. Hopefully you'll be going off to Chicago come fall. So, all right. So you got all that stuff to do. A lot of stuff to do. A lot of stuff to talk about. We're making good progress. Cool. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.